Hello and welcome to another edition of the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuce 85, the niche sports connoisseur, joined once again by my good friend, co-host tonight, Adam Young, superstar in every facet, FSWA Baseball Writer of the Year. It's a big accomplishment. You're a modest guy, I know, so I will do it for you. Pretty fun day one, round one. Didn't have the upsets necessarily. It's kind of weird. Like the upsets we expected to see didn't happen. And then some of the guys that we thought would go through easily didn't. Kind of an odd one there. We'll get into that here a little bit. We have yet another 16-game slate on deck, on tap. Round one, day two. Another grind. It has been a magnificent day, though. Man, how could you not love this sport? Adam, thanks again for joining me. I know we're getting started a little bit later here, but we had to sweat out some things. You know, the Texas Tech game there with Mania and everything else just wasn't going to be able to go on. And I had to do one of my famous, like, disappearing acts and, like, hoping that I was about to light some sage, do some bay leaf stuff. Like, I don't know, whatever I had to do to get through. But very happy that you're joining me. I know it's late, so we'll try to streamline things. But how was day one for you, man? It was a fun day. I know you did some betting stuff, just watching the games in general. Like, it was overall a fun experience.
Yeah, I like to play light on the first day of the NCAA tournament just to kind of sit back and enjoy it. Got a little lucky with a five-legger parlay that included Gonzaga and UCLA, which we talked about last night. So I was kind of living off that. Played one little small survivor contest and survived. And the games were pretty solid. I mean, the last two games, there was a chance for another upset. I kind of want to advance at least two double-digit seed mid-major teams per day. That's kind of like my bare minimum. And we did get that with Drake and, of course, with McNeese. So at least we got two ahead. Maybe tomorrow will be the upset day, maybe a couple buzzer beaters, but certainly not a bad first day.
No, not at all. Not at all. And like right away, my bracket went in the toilet. It always does. Like, it's funny because I watch a lot of games and I like to pride myself on having knowledge of this sport. But when it comes to brackets, man, I am just truly awful. Thought that we'd get Yale through against Texas A&M. Didn't quite work out that way. UC San Diego, what happened, what we thought would happen. Michigan turned the ball over a ton, but it didn't matter. That size disparity was just too much. Fouls on Aniwa Tate Jones. They just couldn't overcome it. They had some opportunities late, and they did push them, but just didn't quite get there. And then you turn around and look at the Midwest. Purdue takes care of High Point kind of handily. And then McNeese, although they tried to give it away at the end, takes care of business against Clemson, holds them to 13 points in the first half, and an absolutely awful showing by the ACC today. Clemson did try their best to come back, and McNeese almost handed it over. Crazy, and we kind of mentioned this last night. McNeese, yeah, their coach is going to be heading to probably NC State, maybe somewhere else. I don't think it's going to matter to these guys. They're all seniors. They don't care. They're not coming back anyways, and they didn't. They played their hearts out. They played their asses off, and now they get a chance against Purdue, and I think they match up against them a little bit better than even High Point did. So, yeah, got that through. Drake beats Missouri. The way Drake sucked the life out of Missouri, that was impressive. And, hey, Arkansas double forward stack. I didn't play it. Damn, I got to rectify the situation, but it would have been optimal if you did. They beat Kansas. Bill Self is defeated by John Calipari. St. John's takes care of business against Omaha. It's St. John's is a tough matchup, but I don't know. Unless they're both like 9K, we might have to keep rolling out this double Arkansas forward stack because it's good. The Mountain West, absolute trash as well. They got dirt napped by UCLA. You and I both were confident that would happen. Tennessee took care of business. So, yeah, for the most part, some pretty solid first day hoops. Texas Tech got pushed by UNC Wilmington. That's a team that you're familiar with being up in that area. Do want to, before we get through here, give ourselves a minor pat on the back here. You, for the Ryan Kalkbrenner call, you had said, man, you better draft him in your tournament leagues. I didn't. Felt stupid for that. They beat Louisville, ACC. Trash day. Kalkbrenner gets game 2. Granted, it'll be against Auburn, but 2 games with Kalkbrenner. You were right, man. So you got to own that call, and you did quite well with it. And then, I did my whole little monologue last night, and I kind of gave you the breakdown earlier in the week and said, I got this Trevelyan Queen-like play from a couple of years ago. Everybody said I was a weirdo for talking about him, this bench player from New Mexico State. What's he going to do? He had a huge game against Auburn. They didn't win that game, but he put up like a 35. present to you Nolan Hodge from UNCW, get the same kind of treatment from people. And I don't blame them. I mean, he didn't have the best logs, but did a lot of homework, saw he had been trending up. They had been giving him more minutes. He played 33 in the finals of the conference tournament, taking more shots, like leaning on him more. There's just a different swagger about him as that tournament progressed. And I watched every single UNCW game in that conference tournament, and I felt really good about the play. Did he do higher and more than I thought he was going to do? Yeah, I'll sit here and say I wasn't necessarily anticipating him to score 32 fantasy points. But damn, it felt good for him to hit that number at low rostership, and the confidence and swagger that he showed. He played so good. I'm starting to think now that some of the high majors might come calling, come knocking for him and his services in the future. But overall, a really good day there for DFS. We get our manias through, we get our survivors through. You had mentioned you got yours through. So feeling pretty damn good about that. We get into the round of 32, round 1, day number 2. All take a bow, pat on the back. Lots of green screens in the Discord. Love to see it. Let's get into this slate. 16 gamer, starting a little bit late. So we're going to try to streamline this as fast as we can without giving you less information. But let's do this. Mississippi State versus Baylor, first game of the day. Close one, probably like Louisville Creighton was, an 8-9 matchup. Mississippi State is a 1.5-point favorite, total of 144.5. I like Mississippi State. They've been a team that I've talked up a lot this year, but man, it's just been brutal for them the last month or two of the season. And this is a spot against Baylor where I could see them possibly get a trip up here. Who are some of the options you're looking at in this game? And is it a betting opportunity perhaps as well? Because it is a coin flip game, but I feel like most people I've talked to have a real hardline stance about which team they're backing in this one.
Yeah, I'll throw the bet out right away. I like Mississippi State money line. You could probably take the spread too. I think the spread was 1.5. So unless they win by 1, you're winning that bet. Nice. But I think Mississippi State wins the game. Although I think Baylor has the better DFS options. Their guards are extremely cheap. You have Robert Wright at 4.3, Jeremy Roach at 4.1, and Nunn, who's kind of been playing a little bit more minutes lately at 3.9. I don't really know if you can go wrong with any of them. In fact, Wright is probably the lowest on my list because of how inconsistent he's been, and he happens to be the most expensive, even though it's only by a couple $100. Jeremy Roach 4.1, just his tournament experience. I think they're going to need that in this game, so I have a little interest there. And Jaden Nunn, like we mentioned, he's seen a spike in minutes, and he's the cheapest of the three. So those two really stand out to me. You have the Norchad O'Meara pay up. I don't know if I'd consider that in my lineup, but he's certainly a double-double machine. And so the Baylor guards really are the thing that stands out to me in this matchup. The Mississippi State side, RJ Melendez, not too bad at 5.1. He's kind of like a last man in type player. Matthews and Murphy, I almost think they're the same. They're always in the 6'6", 6'8" K range. They're solid options, but I don't know if I'll get to it on a 16 teamer or 16 gamer. And then Hubbard at 8.4. He can really light it up at times. Again, it's picking and choosing on a 16-game slate, but so Baylor guards are really what stands out.
Yeah, and unlike today, even though we could have played anyone from Creighton and Louisville, several guys made value. I wasn't really that interested in getting exposure to that one. I wanted the flexibility of making moves later, even though the lineup I started with this morning, I didn't do any swapping whatsoever. So I could have definitely done so. I have a different feeling about this one. I'm certainly interested, and the pricing is much softer on this one than it probably should be. RJ Melendez, you mentioned, 5.1. That's a ludicrously cheap price. I've been rolling out RJ Melendez at 5.7, 5.8 a lot this year. He just rebounds at such a high level. He hits threes. He does a lot in the 27 to 30 minute range that he plays. He's just very active, and I don't think he gets enough credit from the rest of the industry for that. And you can see, and I've been watching for the last 3 hours. I've been like pacing a hole in my floor, so I haven't edited any minutes yet. So some of these might be a little off, but that's okay. But for the most part, you see Melendez projecting at nearly 5x there. Really good price for him. Baylor's undersized right now. We know that. They're having to play a zone kind of hybrid because they don't have anyone to guard, front court options. Jalen Celestine was playing the 4, and they found out real quick that wasn't going to work. Kashawn Murphy's an elite GBP play as usual, 6'7". Not going to get there in a main, but he always projects well. Great rates. And overall, he can do some real damage to this Baylor squad. Claudell Harris at 4.4 is like that trap play because that's very cheap, but Riley Kugel is right there at 5K, and it's truly a hot hand situation. If Kugel gets out there and hits a couple of threes, Claudell's going to play like 12 minutes. If he's awful, gets turnovers, fouls, Claudell's going to play 24 minutes, and if he does, he's going to be a real strong play there in that 4.4 range. So the Mississippi State guards are tough to peg. I think Melendez is definitely a main team look and a guy that I'll be starting my day with. Baylor side, BJ Edgecombe, great GBP look. Norchad Omier, as you mentioned, and then Nunn's cheap. Celestine's cheap. Jeremy Roach is cheap. None of them are really trustworthy, but I feel like we'll have some ownership there. And then for tournaments, the Rob Wright play at 4.3 because he's in that freshman wall. Like he's hit it at the wrong and most inopportune time and really has been struggling. But we know Wright can fill it up. He's put up 30, 40 fantasy point games before. He's just been really dreadful the last 3. But the minutes have still mostly been there. 4-3 in a matchup against Mississippi State where he's going to be able to get shots off and play, upwards of 28, 29, 30 minutes. He's a really strong look. And I think most people are going to go to Nunn because he had a good game a couple, 2 or 3 games ago. But then you got to recognize he had a real bad one the next time out. And then Roach, who hasn't really looked like his Duke version whatsoever, but he's really cheap. So I think Wright offers a lot of leverage. I'm almost tempted to use him in my main. I am not, I'm a big leverage guy anyway, just naturally, and I don't do it just to be different. Like I just hate playing guys because everyone else does. Classic case in point today, Igor Milicic. Don't want to play that fool. I don't like playing him. He's definitely not a guy that I would normally look to in the survivors, in Mania, all that. Like you had to play him, right? Rick Barnes is playing him less and less minutes. He's been trending in the wrong direction. I was so pissed about that because I knew I played myself basically. Luckily, I had some bailouts in the later games, but that's a classic. Like I don't want to play a guy just because everybody else did, and I did. And I feel like these Baylor guards, there might be a little bit of that going on. So you'll have some leverage opportunities here with them for sure. Let's move on. Razzle pops in here. College basketball sucks. I'm retiring. Guessing not the best day. One of the Mania matchups, unfortunately, was against Raz. Didn't like that. Didn't want to play him early. Certainly no feel good story there for me having to beat Raz. And I'm sure he would have said the same had beaten me. So I know it's tilting right now. Trust me, I just spent the last 3 hours pacing, but we still love you, man. All right, moving on here. We got Robert Morris. This is another team that I think you're familiar with versus Alabama. The total here is 166.5. A big surprise Alabama game with a high total. 21.5 point spread here for Bama. Randall and Gus on our betting team, kind of likes the Robert Morris spread here, and I don't think it's such a bad idea, honestly. Robert Morris has some dudes, and like I said, this is a team you're kind of familiar with, being out in that area, and Alabama for sure. The big story here on the Bama side is how healthy is Grant Nelson going to be. He's such a big part of what they do. They absolutely need him. He's supposedly going to be available, and they're going to play him far less minutes than normal. So basically what that means, or what I think that'll mean, is he won't start, and they'll get him some reps, 5 to 10 minutes. The thinking being that they don't necessarily need him to beat Robert Morris, but I wouldn't be so sure. Why don't you give us a rundown on the Robert Morris squad here that we had on a couple of slates here last week and got familiar with. And of course, anyone who plays Alabama, Big Men versus Bama has been a absolute buyer DBP spot. Robert Morris has a couple. What do we want to do here?
Yeah, this is one of those spots where you think, okay, 2-15 matchup. The 15's probably at a major disadvantage, but I think that's canceled out by the fact that they're playing Alabama in a pace-up spot. The game could shoot out. Even if Alabama's up 20 or 30, we talked about this last night. Usually the lower seeds will just leave their guys out there, whether they're winning or if they're down big. So I'm not too concerned about minutes. Their prices are actually relatively cheap compared to what we saw when we were playing them in the conference tournaments. You have Cam Woods at 8.2. I think he was pushing 10K when we were playing him in the conference tournament. And then, of course, you have Folgers, our big guy, at 7.8. And we know how we like bigs against Bama, especially if Grant Nelson's not going to be out there as much. Obviously, that can't hurt Folgers. So he's at least an intriguing option along with Cam Woods. The rest of the guys I'm not too crazy about. I think just the two superstars, because their prices are a little cheaper than what we were used to. The fact that it's a pace-up spot against Bama, the fact that they could be down a little bit in the front court, certainly at least worth considering here, in addition to the Bama guys that I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah, and I'm just fiddling around with minutes here. The projections do obviously really like Alvaro Fulgueras. We call him Folgers. This is our nickname for him. Priced under 8K. Fantastic rates, rebounds well. Fouls, definitely a concern. More so with Amarion Dickerson, their other big man in the front court there. He was really hacking away in the conference tournament. Folgers, though, this is a great spot to target him. I think he'll see a decent amount of rostership, and we typically see a heavy amount of stacks when Alabama's on the slate. And this is going to get things started very early. I think PMR, people are going to be burning a lot of PMR early, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because these first two games are intriguing, but things could be real nasty real quick if you break out. Luckily, there's afternoon and night slates if you need them. But yeah, a lot to like there on the Robert Morris side. There's also, of course, Cam Woods, who's an elite tournament play at 8-2. Everybody's going to be looking to Folgers, I think. He's going to get some ownership, and people won't look to Cam Woods because he's more expensive at 8-2. He doesn't project quite as well, but he's going to play every single minute. And in the conference tournament, man, he had some really rough first halves there against Oakland and Youngstown State. But in the second half, and I believe was it the Oakland game, it went overtime, he took complete control, played, the entire overtime, scored, I think, all but 2 of their points at that point. 41 fantasy points, followed that up with 34. Only 8-2 after he was 9-6 in the conference tournament. So we're getting a huge discount on Cam Woods. Starting to look at this Robert Morris Colonial stack as a really viable look here. Kind of backloading, taking those risks on the Mississippi State values, the Baylor values, and then kind of throwing Cam Woods and Folgers out there. To kind of give yourself a little bit of a cushion there in case you miss on one of those values. So some really nice looks there. We did see Josh Omojafo, to make sure I say that right. He played ridiculously well against Youngstown State, 24-13 because of the Dickerson foul trouble. Played 39 and 36 minutes in those games. They're playing him a lot more. He's actually usurped the 40-point fantasy point mark twice in the last 4. He's there at 5'8". Again, nobody's probably going to be looking to him either. He's a really intriguing tournament option. And this stack on the Robert Morris side, just because they're a 15 seed, definitely doesn't mean we can't look to them. Bama side, with Grant Nelson playing limited minutes, that means it's Mo Diabate time. He's priced there at 5'6". I know fouls are a risk for him, but against Kentucky and a tough Florida front court, absolutely assaulted them. 12 points, 12 rebounds. I love Diabate's game. I want him to play way more minutes than Cliff Omarui. He can't necessarily do it yet because of conditioning and the foul issues, but if he stays on this team, which I believe he will next year, he's going to be a 8K, 9K center that we're just auto playing pretty much every single week. There will be weeks where he gives us foul trouble and we'll be bitching about it, sure, but for the most part, Diabate is just a fantasy point per minute monster. And you'd see 23 minutes against Florida, he puts up 35. He doesn't really need that many minutes, and he could theoretically possibly play 30 here against Robert Morris. And you got to sign me up there. So this is my favorite play for sure. If you think Bama does railroad Robert Morris and turns this into a laugher, Aiden Holloway is only 3'9". Aiden Holloway is an offensive juggernaut. He shoots as good as anybody in the conference. You don't know that or think that because he doesn't play as many minutes. Earlier in the season, he did. LeBaron Philon plays more minutes as the starter, but Holloway, when Philon's in foul trouble or not shooting well, Holloway just steps up and shoots and chucks when he comes in. Basically, his one job when he does come onto the court is to fire up shots. 9 attempts in 23 minutes against Florida, 9 attempts in 20 minutes against Kentucky, 9 attempts in 16 minutes against Tennessee, most of those being 3-point shots. So we have a ton of value. Kind of the flip. We're flipping from earlier today when I said low-scoring slate, that's good for us. We have some value on this slate that is actually pretty damn good, and then I feel positive about, and Aiden Holloway is one of those at 3'9", even if he were to play 18 minutes, and I think he is going to put up 20 plus fantasy points and not pull as much rostership as perhaps even those Baylor starter guards will. So for me, Diabate and Holloway are in consideration for main team, believe it or not. Sears is there at 8'6". I'm probably not there with him. That is a cheap price for him, but I prefer Sears in a little more competitive games. However, if Cam Woods is balling out and this is a close one, might we see Sears play 35 minutes instead of 25? If so, absolutely has to be in play. And then, secondary options like Chris Youngblood, Cliff Omarui, Jaron Stevenson, they don't do a lot for me, but all of those guys are pretty cheap for this Bama game. And that's why we'll probably see 3, 4, maybe even 5-man stacks throughout GPPs for this game. Talked about Robert Morris a little bit. How you feeling about the Alabama side?
I agree with pretty much everything you said. Jaron Stevenson's the one cheapo that I have a little bit of interest in, especially if Grant Nelson just really isn't out there that much at all and the game blows out, which are both of those are certainly possible. And we've seen Jaron Stevenson when he's on the court. At times he could be very active. He could really rack up the fantasy points. So he's like a GPP, a deep GPP if you're going to stack that game. You already mentioned Holloway, but Stevenson, especially if we get a little tea leaves that Grant Nelson might be one of those. He's available, but he's not really going to play at all. Then I'd have a little bit more interest, but he's at least somebody I'm keeping my eye on and might toss him in an alt lineup or two.
For sure. All right, we'll move on to the next one here. Lipscomb versus Iowa State. Total of 142.5. Iowa State, a 14.5 point favorite. A volatile 3 seed here that is going to be vulnerable because they will not have Keshawn Gilbert throughout the tournament. I mean, Lipsy is not 100%. They're going to lean heavily on Curtis Jones and Josh Jefferson in this one. Maybe a little DeJon Jackson, which you've had some success with. And we'll get into Lipscomb here a little bit in a second. But why don't you start us off on this one? Because Iowa State stacks will probably be relatively popular as well. And we've had some mixed results with those.
Yeah, Iowa State, Curtis Jones, I mean, he completely detonated against BYU that game in the conference tournament when I think Lipsy and Gilbert were both out. Lipsy should be back, but Curtis Jones, is obviously the better option of the two. He's still relatively has a palatable price. Josh Jefferson's a safe play, somebody you could plug in. No, he's probably going to get you 30 plus. Not crazy about him. DeSean Jackson, I'm at least interested. I don't know that much about Lipscomb, but I'm guessing and I'm almost certain there's no way that they're a big team. So I do think that Jackson can really crash the boards. He could get even be a double threat if he gets enough minutes. He's still cheap. They're obviously down one person in the rotation. I know it's a guard, but doesn't hurt being down a guy in the rotation. So I'm at least interested there. Lipsy, I'm never really getting to him. His price isn't that far down. Sometimes when you see guys get hurt and then they come back, they're like McMillan tonight. If he had played, for example, he was going to be 4.8. If Lipsy was down there, maybe I'd have some marginal interest, but at this price, no. So Jefferson, decent option. He's going to get you some points. Jones, obviously you could play at 7-2. And then Jackson, if you think he's going to be out there long enough, it's all about the minutes with him. But it's worth taking a stab at only 5K. Yeah,
for sure. You were right. Lipscomb, they're not the biggest team in the world. Jacob Ognjenovic, he's really struggled against higher major front courts, but he's their star. They do have a 6'10" kid, Charlie Williams, who is a little bit of a Jesse Johnny in the stat there. He would call him a stiff. I don't know if I'd use that word for him, but yeah, they're not prepared for Josh Jefferson. Jefferson's such an elite tournament play here. He's gonna, assuming he doesn't get into foul trouble, he's gonna have an absolute monster game here. I do want to throw a shout to Lipscomb, Gayasi Powell. Earlier in the season when Lipscomb was on like 2 slates, and I think they were playing Arkansas, Powell was mega cheap, like 4-3. Nobody used him but us, and he had a couple of threes and put up 20 and looked really good. And now he's, as the season's gone on, become arguably their second best player, especially from an offensive standpoint. He's begun putting up 30s with regularity. He's only priced at 5K. Even against a tougher defense like Iowa State, I think there's some merit to playing Powell, and the projections would agree there, especially if he plays over 30 minutes. A 4.2x projection. Josh Jefferson, the top overall play here, but Curtis Jones playing a bunch of minutes, definitely in line. And then Deshaun Jackson at that 5K mark, same reason as Jefferson, but a discount. He typically plays like 18 to 20 minutes, but he's been raising his fantasy point per minute number pretty high. So there's a lot to like in this one for the Iowa State side. But I do want to stop short of stacking them up because I had mentioned we had some mixed results there with them. They are prone to letdown games. I think they win, but I don't know that I want to have a game stack of this one. And we're already super interested in the previous two games we talked about. Might be out of PMR by the time we get to the afternoon set. Scott, I don't see much of Scott Payne these days. Super Illinois fan, longtime friend of the show and of me. Says Illini by 50 over Xavier. I knew that you would be in here for that one. That's going to be a great game too. This slate's like the polar opposite of today's slate, Adam. It's going to be a fun one. And then real quick, I didn't mention at the beginning, but one of the, I did say like I get these sacrifices, promising people things if I can get the mojo and the good vibes to make it to the next round. And I said I would wear baby blue, the color baby blue on the show every day until the tournament ended. And as a man of my word, I did do that. So I have a Toon Squad Space Jam jersey. Doesn't really fit me because it's actually one of my kids, but it fits just enough because I got to honor that word. So I'm looking at my little picture here in the corner, and it looks like I'm wearing kid's jersey because I am. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Colorado State versus Memphis. This in another game. Like this is just like a loaded slate. So much happier with this slate than I was earlier today, but it's going to be higher scoring. That part of it I don't necessarily love. Colorado State is a 1.5 point favorite at last look, total of 146.5. At open, it was 2.5 points in favor of Colorado State. It got briefly to 3.5, which I jumped on plus 3.5 for Memphis because you, myself, Raz, when he was on the show, we were all scratching our heads like, what is this about? Had Mike on the show a couple of nights ago. He agreed, like, Memphis is loaded. We've talked about it at length. We all love Memphis. I have a Memphis shirt behind me that I got rush ordered from Amazon on the wife's Prime account because I am going to the game tomorrow with my older son who's hanging out in the other room right now. We're super excited for Memphis, all over Memphis. Yes, no Tyrese Hunter, but guess what? They still have Dane Danger. They still have PJ Haggerty. This squad is still loaded and super athletic. And we're getting PJ Haggerty under 9K for the first time in a while. Now it's 8.9. It's right there, but pretty damn cheap for him. Danger's there at 8.8. Feel inclined to play at least one of these guys here. We have all the cheapies that we've just got into from the previous 3 games. We can easily fit one of Haggerty or Danger going to the game, so you can rest assured I will be playing one. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, PJ Haggerty, anytime he was under 10K for a while, we were playing him. So under 9K, right. And seeing what some of these teams have done to Mountain West opponents. Now, I think Colorado State is the most formidable Mountain West opponent, probably overall. They're the hottest team in the Mountain West, one of the hottest teams in the nation. So I'm not saying that Memphis is going to put up 100 on them, which is what UCLA looked like they were going to do to Utah State today. But PJ Haggerty under 9K, certainly there's massive interest there. We know, just like you said, we have some value on this slate versus today's slate. So we can jam him in. I probably would be more inclined to play Haggerty over Danger. Even though Danger can have monster games, I just want the guy with the ball in his hands. I also have some interest in Musa Cisse at 5.5. He's had some big games. I don't know if I'm probably not getting there on a 16 gamer because he's another rug pull type player where we saw 2 big games out of him. You're expecting 30, and then he goes out there and fouls and is invisible. So it probably won't get there. It's pretty much all about Danger or Haggerty, but I lean Haggerty. And then the one value, if you really want to get there, with Hunter out, if they start, I forget his first name, Okoji at 3.4, I think he's at.
Baraka, yep.
Baraka Okoji, yeah, he was pretty active in his start in the last game. So if he's starting again, you could do their things could be much worse at 3.4. But yeah, mostly just Haggerty. If I'm going to Memphis, I'm probably plugging him in.
Yeah, he ended up, I thought I was banking on PJ Carter because we had seen PJ Carter play extended minutes there recently. So, I had thought, and a lot of other people did too, because the ownership was much higher on Carter. So the industry as a whole, not just us, thought Carter was going to be the starter. And when he's played, he's been much more of an offensive, or he has more of an offensive acumen than Okogie did. But Okogie was very active, hit some threes, got some steals, like arguably looked better than PJ Carter, and they're at 3.4. So we have another guy under 4K. We have a complete script flip here from the values kind of ugly for this one. We know it's going to be lower scoring because the pricing is tight. Now we've got day 2, round 1, and we've got a lot looser pricing, which means a lot higher scoring. So it means mistakes will be punished a lot more. But I do think Haggerty, and you can see at 8-9, 39, 40 minutes. It's the 10. You have the 10K rule where if they project well over 4X, we just have to play them. You see this one sticking out like a sore thumb, 8-9, 39 to 40 minutes, almost a 4.6X projection number. Definitely like PJ Haggerty, like Dane Danger. I think Danger is probably more of the tournament look there, where Haggerty can be your Survivor Mania single entry guy. And if you want to play both, you can play both. Nick Clifford has been a stud. There's a lot of talk about he's their NBA guy, but still at Memphis, just going to outnumber them there. So certainly going to be heavily involved in this game, and not from DFS only, but also betting them extremely heavy. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have Mount St. Mary's. They beat American yesterday because Matt Rogers got hurt against Duke. Total of 140.5. Duke is a 31.5 point favorite. We saw Houston absolutely just belt to booty on SIUE. Javier Francis kind of complaining about that today. He had a nice game. Only played 15 minutes, but man, he had a nice game. I think we could see something similar from some secondary Duke players. How much is Cooper Flagg really going to have to be used? This is one of this exact same situation. Grant Nelson, he'll be available. They'll want to get him some, reps on the court, right? But I don't think we see him play a ton of minutes by any means. You have Cyan James, you have Tyrese Proctor, come on, Malawak, they're all cheap. Con Knipple is still pretty cheap at 8-1 without a full strength Cooper Flagg. But I want to do what I should have done today with Javier Francis and look to Pat Ngangba, who has been a shot blocking machine in short order and a high-level rebounder, playing about 13 to 18 minutes. Now, having Flagg available and around makes this a lot riskier of a play, and we have Aiden Holloway at 3.9, a couple of other guys that we just got done talking about. So Ngbangba is probably more of a tournament look, but I definitely don't want to get caught without any exposure if I'm running multiple lineups, because he definitely can put up a solid number like we saw from Francis today. I actually really like him, especially if this gets out of hand early. We could probably see some extended minutes in the second half for Pat, and going up against that Mount St. Mary's front court, which has some physicality to it. I think he's going to absolutely detonate against them there. Fouls, always a risk there, but for tournaments, I think Ngbangba could be an optimal play. So what do you think here with this Duke squad?
Yeah, Ngamba's the first guy I wrote down. Simply, he kind of reminds me of, you mentioned Xavier Francis, kind of like a Terry Arsenault as well, where you just expect the game to blow out, where he's going to get minutes, and if he gets enough minutes, it's almost certain he's going to hit value. He probably won't break the slate, but you saw Arsenault, I think, finish with 19, was perfectly fine at his price point today. Francis actually had a much bigger game than I thought. If we played that game 10 times in a row, I don't know if he has that kind of game, but Arsenault and Francis, we knew they were going to get in the game. We know when they get minutes, they're solid. So Ngamba is certainly somebody you could look to with that type of logic. The rest of Duke, it's just a difficult situation because Cooper Flagg, if he is 100% just plays as if it's a normal game, even in that case, the game probably blows out. They pull him early. But how active is he going to be? How much use is he going to command? How's that going to affect the Tyrese Proctors, the Cyan Jameses? I don't know how much I want to get involved with it, although it's difficult not to, simply because you know they're going to put up a crooked number. It's just kind of identifying what pocket of value that you want to go towards.
For sure.
So Ngamba certainly stands out to me as a value. I don't know what I'll do with the rest of the guys. And then I'm almost just blindly fading Mount St. Mary's, even though they look pretty good in that playing game. They have some dudes, but not going to stop any of those guys in against Duke.
No, they do have some guys, and you had said, the research that you had pulled that the starters for 16s and 15s were coming through. I do think some of the Mount St. Mary starters will come through. But because we have so much additional value on this particular slate, it just feels a little bit too cute there. I don't think it's needed. So I'll be looking elsewhere as well. And just so you know, I wasn't laughing at anything you said. Just reading the chat here. Very hilarious conversation going on between Scott and Razzle here. Just pop it up there. Highly recommend that you don't file for divorce from your wife in early November if you plan on to play CBB DFS in the upcoming year. Scott is a huge grinder. He has every year that I've been in this industry, like, played heavily and hung out with us, and haven't seen him much this year. So that's the reason why. And Raz wants to tell him it's a rookie move. Should have DM'd him for advice. Yeah, Raz knows that very well. And I would agree. Mid-April, definitely. So he said next one. That's what made me laugh. His next ex-wife. All right, let's keep it moving here, because I know it's late and I don't want to do the show alone tonight. Vanderbilt versus St. Mary's, total of 135.5. St. Mary's is a 4.5 point favorite. You know, I like St. Mary's. I've been drafting them like crazy. I think that they're going to go far. Kicking myself in the butt today because I thought I had BYU beating VCU, and then I flipped inexplicably overnight. I like this St. Mary's team for kind of the same reason that I liked BYU. I think they have a chance to kind of make a mini run through the tournament here. This is a really solid option to go to. Vanderbilt away from home is a team that doesn't scare anybody. We've had a lot of success with St. Mary's. We know the main issue with them is that they have foul issues with guys like Saxon and Moraskis. But look at the prices on these guys. Marshall Lunas at 8K, Saxon at 7.5. I suppose those are about where we would expect them to be, but we've definitely seen them higher. And then because of the foul issues that Polyus has had lately, he's all the way down there at 5.9K. He's only 900 more than Harry Wessels now. Think about that little disparity. That's a multi-$1,000 price difference in most of the season. Polyus is now cheaper than Luke Barrett even. Vanderbilt has guys that can drive. Polyus has foul issues. Can we go to him at 5.9? Because if he plays his usual allotment of minutes, we're talking about a slate breaker.
Yeah, you certainly can go to him, and I probably will. I'm just going to, especially if it's a GPP. I mean, I swung and missed today with Ben Gregg. We talked about him on the show, but he's just a player. If you go to him and he detonates off the chalk, Braden Huff, then you're really going to be cooking. I don't think Moraskis is going to be unowned. In fact, people might flock there. He might be pretty popular, but he's just one of those guys that you just know if he's out there, if he avoids the foul trouble, he's cheaper than Luke Barrett. I mean, that says a lot. Luke Barrett's out there 40 minutes, blowout or not, but he's just a very low fantasy point per minute guy, whereas Moraskis can put up a double-double. He stays out of foul trouble pretty easily. He can step out, hit some threes. So, I mean, he's just, in terms of St. Mary's, we've played so many of their slates where this price just doesn't make any sense at all unless you know he's going to be in foul trouble. So I'm willing to take the chance that he's going to be out there in a game where they need him. So he's the top option. I'm sure he projects pretty nuclear as well. Probably over 5x.
Yep, over 5x. Yep.
And then Marshall Lunas is at least a little bit interesting. I just think there's maybe some other pay. I mean, PJ Haggerty at 8.9 versus Marshall Lunas at 8K. It's not that big of a difference. I'd rather play somebody like Haggerty, but we've seen Marshall Lunas kind of run up the score a little bit at times. And Saxon's priced appropriately. Barrett's priced appropriately. Wessels has had some decent games, but at 5K, he's a little high. And then the Mikey Lewis, who we loved going to, is just probably not worth it in this spot. Jordan Ross has been in a pretty big slump. He hasn't been scoring the ball as much. So it's probably Moraskis number one. And then you could dabble with Marshall Lunas and or Saxon.
Yeah. And on the Vanderbilt side, everybody's cheap there, but the matchup's porous. I don't have the DVP felt. I'm not. I was planning to have this all done like today because I am to leave early in the morning for the game. But of course, once the game started getting to a sweat, I just started watching them entirely. So I don't have the DVP filters on this yet. So like guys, Jason Edwards 5'1", Hoggard at 4'8". Well, I know you're not a big fan of it. I'm usually not either. Tyler Tanner at 3'5", Chris Mannion at 5K. Like these are cheap prices for them, and as of now they project pretty well. But once we actually factor in that DVP, they'll all go down a little bit. Edwards is pretty intriguing still at 5'1", because we know he's going to get those shots up, but because he's so shot reliant, he can go long stretches without scoring. And he did that in their last game. Like he had no fantasy points between the middle part of the first half and deep into the second half. And then once the game kind of got out of hand, he scored like 10 or 12 real within a 3-minute period to kind of rescue his day. So it does make me nervous for these guys, but it's again, another bunch of cheap guys. And we're just, each game that we're going through, just complete opposite. Would have almost preferred it to be more balanced between the 2 days instead of, hey, this slate's going to be super priced up, tight, low scoring. This one's going to be video game scoring. So just be prepared for that. But yeah, Paulius, as of now, unfiltered, unedited, just straight up raw, playing 30, 31 minutes at this price. He's like 5.5 X. So you're probably right. He's going to be majorly chalky. And that is one chalk play that I am happy to play. I like Paulius a lot. I don't know that anyone on Vanderbilt will necessarily get him into foul trouble. Edwards does draw a ton of fouls at 6.2 fouls per 40, and he drives a lot, but I'm not as worried there. Jalen Carey, Devin McLaughlin, those type of guys, the ones that will probably be guarding him, they foul a ton as well. So Paulius will probably end up getting a lot of free throws in this one. All right, moving on to the next game here. North Carolina, come on and raise up. Ole Miss. This is a intriguing game for sure. Total of 155.5. North Carolina 2.5-point favorites. Opened at, I believe, 1.5. So that's gone a little bit the other way. No faith in Ole Miss by the public just yet, I guess. You know everything there is to know about North Carolina. You married into the family. Why don't you start us off here and break it down? Because North Carolina is looking like they got to carry the torch here for the ACC. Louisville, Clemson, both faltered today. Duke, I don't think will falter, but North Carolina has to make a little bit of a run here. I think they can in this matchup.
Yeah, I do like North Carolina in the game. I think that's my second best bet. I had Mississippi State money line or spread. And then North Carolina, I'll probably just take the money line since the spread's actually going towards them. And they're, like you said, -2.5. So I might as well just take the money line. As for DFS, RJ Davis is still kind of hovering in that 7-6 range, which he hasn't been as active. Teams are really trying to get the ball out of his hands and or make him pull up from way deep and contested threes. But 7-6, I mean, if this game is high scoring, I think you said the total is in the 150s. 7-6 for RJ Davis certainly can go there if you want. Van Allen Lubin, I've been toying with playing him in GPPs because Van Allen Lubin right now is just a completely different player than he was at the beginning of the season. It's almost like what we saw with the North Carolina run several years ago, where Brady Manick was very pedestrian for most of the season and then completely different player in the tournament. I don't think I'm going to do that here, but just somebody to keep an eye on. Jalen Withers is the same thing at 6'4", too expensive for my taste, but we've seen him even at this price point. He's knocking down threes. He can put up a pretty crooked number. Probably won't go there, though. You have the two guards, Elliot Cadeau, 5'8", Seth Trimble at 5'5". They're kind of like lineup fillers. They've seemed to alternate good games between the two of them. Probably not going there, though. So it's RJ Davis at 7'6". And, Ian Jackson, unfortunately, is off my radar now, even at 3'9". Just can't trust him there, even though he has he's probably the best pure scorer on the team besides RJ. And RJ Davis is a good option for me. I'm not sure how they project, but North Carolina is always kind of priced in appropriately. There's nobody that absolutely jumps out as a must play other than RJ, because the narrative is he's senior. This is it for him. He's got to kind of carry them through this, and I do think they'll win the game.
Yeah, this is a very fantasy-friendly game. Most of the relevant players are pretty cheap, except for, as you mentioned, Withers, who's getting up there, Van Allen Lubin. Even at 7K, though, Lubin does project pretty well. The Ole Miss front court's not too formidable. DVP-wise, if Malik Dia plays like 32 minutes, 33 minutes like he has the past 2 games, he is an absolute slam dunk city play.
Yep.
Now, he is priced at 6'4", so it's a little uncomfortable there because we have seen Chris Beard use him in such an odd way. Like today with JT Toppin, the way that he played 5 minutes, then he sat for almost 6, came back, and then sat after 2 minute stretch. And you had made the comment like sitting on their water break. It was totally inexplicable because they've used him like that before sometimes, but lately we hadn't seen that. So it looked like it was about to go sideways. Thankfully it didn't. We see that with Malik Dia all the time. Chris Beard will play him 2 or 3 minutes, then he sits for a long stretch, then he plays another 2 or 3 minutes, and then I started thinking, like, is his conditioning that bad? But when he's out there, he's super active, he's making things happen more often than not. In like 10-minute, first half window, he's got double-digit fantasy points. Now we've seen him play 33 and 32 minutes in each of the last 2 games, and I'm starting to look at this matchup like, hey, he can grab rebounds. Hey, he put up a 60-plus for us a couple of months ago. Remember, we had that really nice hit on him. Against Arkansas, 32 minutes, almost 40. Against Auburn in 30 minutes, almost 30. So against North Carolina in that spot, I could see a double-double where he scores 15 and grabs 10 rebounds and really pays this price off. So there's a bit of a risk to it in Survivor and Mania and stuff. I might not put my chips in there, and that's only because I don't know if it's less about trusting him and more about trusting Chris Beard's rotations. But Chris Beard is a smart guy. His butter is his bread is buttered here from Malik Dia playing heavy minutes, and that needs to continue. Jameer Brakefield is fine, and he's shown that he can play extended minutes as well too. Mikael Brown-Jones, same thing, but Malik Dia is just an absolute star. And when it comes to fantasy purposes, he's easily the best player in this game from a fantasy point perspective. Might not turn out that way, but I definitely want exposure. And if you're building alt lineups, he's the guy that you have to have. And then the usuals, Matthew Morrell, Jalen Murray, like they're all cheap and project okay. Not really that keen on them. I do see a pretty large projection on Drake Powell, but I don't have these filtered just yet with DVP and everything. Powell is there at 4.6, playing, pretty heavy minutes in competitive games. Didn't have to play a lot in the SDSU game, but we saw him play 28 plus minutes in 3 of their last 4 prior to that. So there is some merit to maybe using him and his guard forward eligibility. It's weird seeing Ian Jackson at 3.9 and not really having to play him or being able to because the minutes just aren't there right now, but still a young guy, still developing. I'm certainly not writing off the Lubin Withers plays. You guys have been, you and Brett have been on those guys for weeks and months at this point, and I've been pretty late to those calls, but switching to them over Washington, it's been a big boost for them, and it's kind of tempered the opposing bigs narrative against them as well. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have Grand Canyon versus Maryland. This is the second game in session 1 there at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. This one comes with a total of 150.5. Maryland is a 10.5 point favorite. Grand Canyon, this is one just like McNeese today with Clemson, where I don't really expect Grand Canyon to beat Maryland. I think it'll be somewhat competitive for a while there, but and Grand Canyon has some great pieces, but this Maryland team is really good, and I almost felt like coming into the tournament they're a little underrated, but now I'm hearing a lot of people say that, so now it's almost like they're getting overrated, but definitely have some interest here. But it's and I think it's gonna be a really good game. Like, I'm excited to watch it, but I don't know if it's one that we necessarily have to prioritize from a main team perspective. And the prices on guys, Derek Queen is 9.5, Gillespie 8.3, Julian Reese is down to 8K. That certainly makes me somewhat intrigued. And then you can have Ty on Grant Foster at 7.8, which when healthy, we know he's as good as anyone, but he hasn't quite looked the part, at least recently. And Maryland's a pretty terrible matchup on paper for him. So who are some of the pieces in this one that you might be considering?
Yeah, we've seen so many Maryland slates that we almost have their prices probably memorized in our head where they're kind of usually at. And Reese, the only one whose price doesn't match up with what we're used to, down at 8K. Yeah. And I remember this was maybe 3 weeks ago when Reese had dipped below 9K. We were super interested. It was a Saturday slate. He couldn't score, but he had something like 8 blocks and steals combined and ended up paying off. So this kind of reminds me a little bit of that, where you could certainly go to Reese simply because he's underpriced compared to the rest of his teammates who are priced around where we're used to seeing them. And then Grand Canyon, you have the two Grant Foster and Jacoby Coles. I know Coles got in massive foul trouble in the conference title game, which kind of ruined his box score. But those two guys and they're going to do most of the damage there. I don't think Duke Brennan's not like a smash for me in this matchup like he was in the conference title game where he's projecting really well. Maryland's a very good defensive team. They have good bigs. They have good size. So I'm not like rushing to play anybody on Grand Canyon. It's pretty much just Reese. Reese is the only one who's extremely mispriced that I at least have some interest in. But again, we can be picky on these type of slates. So I'm probably not going to go there.
Yeah, this will be one where the only one that at this moment that projects any kind of decently is Julian Reese. And yes, that price is solid. But I still feel kind of inclined to using him as a secondary play, tournament play, alt-team play. I don't know if I can get into my main lineup with him just because there is that propensity to get into foul trouble. They at least have some talent in that front court with Jacoby Coles, and Grant Foster, and even to a lesser extent, Duke Brennan, who's a pretty physical player too. So I do expect this one to be a competitive game, but both teams are fairly balanced at this point, and I don't know that it has the appeal that it would normally on a smaller slate, and one that doesn't have, we just rattled off 6 or 7 games in front of this one that I could honestly see playing 1 or 2 pieces from in my main build. When I get to this one, I don't have that same feeling, but I do have, from a betting perspective, all over Maryland and just real life watching the game, feel pretty excited about it. All right, moving on to next game, Norfolk State versus Florida, total of 153.5. Florida is a 28.5 point favorite. I don't typically take these gigantor spreads. And I love, all season long, I watch MEAC and SWAC teams. I really like them. And shout out to Alabama State because they played with Auburn for a long time today. But Norfolk State's going to be up against it, the MEAC representative here. Florida, for most so-called experts on, ESPN and the media, they're picking Florida. I'm picking Florida. A lot of people that I believe are very, very smart in this portion of the industry are picking Florida. They lay the wood to SEC teams on the regular. So Norfolk State's going to have a really tough time of it. Ken Palm's projection is 89.64, and I even feel like that seems like that's too close than it'll actually be. I'd be surprised if Norfolk State scored more than 60, and I'd be surprised if Florida didn't hang 100. So I definitely don't mind the spread here if you want to make a large bet like that. I tend to shy away from those, but Florida is going to absolutely put it on them here. This is one spot where the blowout does worry me for some of the bigger options here, Walter Clayton, Alex Condon, Thomas Howe, Elijah Martin. But I don't know why it's like they turned the pricing down for this slate. Clayton's only 8-1. Condon's only 7-7. He's had a couple bricks, so kind of interested to go back to him. Hoff is 6'3". Elijah Martin is 6'3", and Will Richard is 6'2". Will Richard doesn't get rostered by anyone, but he's been having some big games lately. It almost makes no sense to take the Micah Handlog and Denzel Aberdeen, cheap values at the anticipation of maybe getting some blowout run when the starting crew is so cheap themselves. So then it kind of flips to, well, if they play reduced minutes, it might still be okay because these prices are ridiculously low. How are you feeling about Florida in this one? Because when I first saw the game, I'm like, that's going to be an easy fade. But when I look at these prices, kind of makes me feel differently.
Yeah, I'm actually okay with playing Walter Clayton, especially because just think about last night when we were talking about the St. John's game. We're expecting a blowout. Yep. It was a blowout. I actually didn't see what some of those guys finished with, but they had to really play the entire first half. It was a little bit of a back and forth for a while. And then, of course, they did play through part of the second half as well. If we're okay playing RJ Lewis at 9-3 today or Kadari Richmond at 9-5, then why would we not at least have interest in Walter Clayton at 8-1? And even with the same concerns that we've had with St. John. So even Condon as well. Some of the forwards, there could be foul trouble, whereas with Clayton, you're probably not contending with foul trouble. But I mean, Howe should still be able, or Howe and Condon should both still be able to put up big numbers. But Clayton's the one who I would look to the most, simply because, like I said, we were okay playing with an RJ Lewis today in the 9Ks. So at 8-1, I mean, that's significantly cheaper for Clayton than we're used to. and we expect them to score 100. Clayton hopefully runs it up into the 35-40 range, and then before they yank him. But that's certainly somebody who in GPP, I don't know if they'll be as popular as they should be because people might have those concerns that we kind of addressed.
Yeah, this slate is shaping up to be silly high scoring. RJ Lewis put up 22, 8 and 2 today, by the way. So it was a really nice one for him. Not as great for Zuby. And then Kadari Richmond had 10, 8 and 6. Like they still, did some nice things there. And RJ Lewis, just absolute star. So yeah, I could see any one of these Florida players doing well. One shout for me on the Norfolk side is Christian Ings. Probably would be looking to hit his point prop if it's at 11.5 like it was last game. He's 5'8", not much of a DFS play here, but he is their best player and capable of scoring a decent chunk. I actually haven't projected for 15 real points, which with his shot rate isn't outside of the realm of possibilities and kind of falls into that research you did where the starting lineup for the 16 and 15 seeds are tending to get there because they're playing those extended minutes, and then they get that run against second and third units, which usually leads to them scoring a little bit more as well. All right, we're cruising right along here. Next game, Troy versus Kentucky. Total of 151.5. Kentucky is an 11.5 point favorite. While I get this pulled up here, they do have some guys who are banged up, of course. Lamont Butler expected to be there. I thought Troy plus 10.5 was a solid bet. Now it's plus 11.5. And I'm I do have Troy picked, but after seeing some of the upsets I thought would happen, not happen, I'm starting to feel a little bit like Troy maybe doesn't have the chance that I thought they would. But this Kentucky team, I'm not trusting one bit with the injuries they have. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I know Mike Randall loves betting Troy. And I think 10.5, it's a decent number. If Troy can just hang with them for most of the game, you could see them possibly cover UNC Wilmington. I can't remember the exact final score because we're getting ready to hop on this as it was ending, but it was around that 10-point mark. I think Troy could certainly hang with Kentucky. Kentucky's banged up, like you mentioned. Lamont Butler, he doesn't have a questionable tag or anything here, but I think you were talking about him. He's certainly not 100%. So I'd almost just cross him off entirely, even at his price point. The rest of the Kentucky guys, Ortega Owe at 8K, not a bad price. Amari Williams, I mean, sometimes we see him interested, sometimes we see him disinterested. I think he should be interested since it's an NCAA tournament game and they could be going home. But I think the player I'm most interested is actually on the Troy side with Connerway. I think he's just his price point plus the fact that you're playing against Kentucky. We kind of talked about it with the Robert Morris players where even though they're playing a high major team, the pace-up spot with Alabama was kind of canceled that out. So Connerway is somebody who I'd expect should put up a pretty crooked number even against Kentucky. And if the game stays close, I mean, he really could run it up there. So Connerway is kind of my top option. And then Kentucky, maybe I'd go with an Amari Williams simply because he should be able to get a double-double if he's interested. And then the rest of the guys I'm kind of just wishy-washy with.
Yeah, I like the Connerway play myself. The clear top player on the team, has the number one steal rate in the country, top 20 assist rate, 27.1% shot rate, which is top 250 in the country, top 150 usage rate at 27.4%. Like he's definitely the do everything for them. Kentucky, we know that they get involved with some very fantasy friendly games. The chatter here is that, okay, having Lamont Butler back, that's going to cause Connerway to get contained. But like Butler just hasn't looked himself. And I know he's been super cheap when he did play and he'd been kind of highly owned. But just what I've been telling our community, I just can't use him because when I'm watching the games, he's not 100%. Like and we saw many times where he had flare-ups. We were kind of worried about that with Darian Williams today. He actually was fine and looked pretty good in short spurts, but it's definitely a concern for me with Lamont Butler that one misstep and he's going to be back sidelined. So I'm not convinced that he's going to be able to play that top-notch elite on-ball defense that we've come to expect from him. So I'm not that worried about it with Connerway. He may be a little more of a luxury play on this slate, but he's definitely in the player pool. Same can be said for those, Marcus Rigsby, Miles Rigsby as kind of tournament plays here. Marcus is a only 4.5K, Miles at 5'8", so they're at least somewhat interesting. We'll take it Alway, assuming that he shook off the whole bloody all over the court thing and didn't have a concussion or anything. He's at least at 8K in the conversation for sure. Andrew Carr's been a guy that we like a lot, but his price has come up to 6'8" now, so I'm not really looking to get there with him. And then with Butler around, it does downgrade guys like Chandler, Noah Perry, who had been seeing additional minutes. So I'm actually going to be ending up with almost no Kentucky, but I might have a little bit of Troy here. And I'm betting. I have several tickets on Troy at this point. All right, moving on. We have a Mountain West team. Can they prove it? It's funny because coming into this one, the Selection Sunday mentioned like, man, I keep harping on like this. San Diego State made that run, but if you throw that out, like they just have been barrel rolled in the tournament for the last half decade. So they've got some proving to do to the committee, not only, but also just the country as a whole. New Mexico here taking on Marquette. Doesn't set up as a great spot. This game to me felt like a no bet unpickable, but the more I see Mountain West falter and the more I look at Marquette with Cam Jones, the more comfortable I am betting them. They're currently 3.5 point favorites, total of 152.5. Now, New Mexico has some absolute studs, Nelly Jr. Joseph and Donovan Dent. Both are priced up very heavy. I like Nelly Jr. Joseph's individual matchup against this Marquette front court, but I'm not going to be getting there at that 9-4 price. We do, to be clear, have the value, which we've identified in the first half of the slate, but he's just going to be very difficult to get there because if there is fouls or New Mexico just gets taken out of their game early, it's going to backfire quite quickly, and that's just going to ruin whatever buildup and points that you have from the earlier part of the slate. Same could be said for Donovan Dent, although I do think that could be a fun one-off, him versus Cam Jones, just a scoring battle going on. So GPP-wise, putting those two in a lineup together does seem pretty interesting. Cam Jones is on the lower end of 9K at 9.2, which makes him a very playable option. And then, of course, as usual, Marquette guys like Chase Ross, Stevie Mitchell, David Joplin all are going to project decently, but I will be modifying them down because Chase Ross, when he's not getting a million steals, doesn't do enough offensively. Stevie Mitchell, when he's not making 8 3-pointers in a game, he's not doing enough in those peripherals. And David Joplin is priced at 7.3 now, a little bit too spendy for me at this point. Cam Jones is a guy, I don't think you've necessarily written him off, but he definitely harmed you in a way early on that you've kind of looked elsewhere. And when he's had some busts, it just hasn't impacted you like it has a lot of the other industries. So how are you feeling about him now in a tournament setting and anyone else in this game you might be using?
It's a rare case where I'd probably be okay using him simply because New Mexico is one of the fastest paced teams in the country. There's probably going to be a lot of possessions, a lot of back and forth in this game. I mean, certainly one in a GPP, if you just want to stack the entire thing somehow, I wouldn't be against it. I mean, this is a game, especially because I do think there's a lot of people out there who like New Mexico. Marquette's probably a better team, but we've seen them have some letdown spots too. This could be one of those classic double, triple overtime game. And with the amount of possessions that we're going to see on both sides, if you're going to stack it, you might as well just go all the way in a GPP. But in terms of a main lineup, Donovan Dent is a player who I've really liked targeting in GPPs in the past because he doesn't draw as much ownership because his price was always like 10K and it was a late night slate. But he has paid off at times, even at that price. And I think Marquette is at least a matchup. He's not going up against an Iowa State or a Houston or even like a Drake where the possessions are going to be lower and the defense is providing a lot of resistance, but probably not going there. Junior Joseph's even more expensive than Dent. I think this will be more of just an entertaining game to watch and maybe stack if you want at low ownership and just hope it goes to a couple overtimes or just has a million possessions. But there's nobody I'm really trying to force into a main lineup. I think there's the high end guys are just priced a little too high for me.
Yeah, I would agree. And looking at the initial projections here, as mentioned, Stevie Mitchell and Chase Ross both project well as they tend to do. I won't be probably using them much, but Cam Jones does stick out there as a pretty strong overall play. Now that it's a tournament time, I definitely have interest there, but probably won't get there in my main lineup either. But I do feel it could be potentially awful to have no exposure to this game, because you had mentioned if it's close and hits them a couple overtimes like the Chattanooga game the other night, things could become dire very, very quickly if you don't have exposure. All right, next one here, Akron versus Arizona. This starts session 2 in Seattle. Arizona is a 14.5-point favorite, total of 166.5. There were people initially talking about this being a rougher matchup for Arizona, and that they might struggle with Akron. I don't personally see that whatsoever. This Akron team, and I know you not necessarily have a fondness for them, but you do like them, and they are, clearly best team coming out of the MAC. But I don't think they've seen too many teams like Arizona. And I know Arizona is inconsistent. The whole Caleb Love can shoot you in, shoot you out thing, I know all of that. But the way KJ Lewis is playing right now, it's scary. And I don't think he's going to have any drop-offs right now. And I do look at the Akron front court here and think that Henry Visar, Carter Bryant, Toba Waka, if he's not fouling, could have really big games on the glass. Does make me like Visar and KJ Lewis as potential main team looks. But what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, Akron's a team I like. We've mentioned many times that it's not the same roster that they had last year, but they're certainly a team that impressed me in that game against Miami, Ohio. They were trailing by a hefty amount kind of late in that contest and came all the way back. And some of their players are actually pretty cheap. I mean, almost their whole lineup is cheap, where I haven't watched them enough this year, so I might be a little off with the projections, but some of their guys, like Nate Johnson kind of caught my eye, Tavari Johnson as well. They're just really cheap. And based on their seasonal averages, this could be a decent spot. We know Arizona likes to run up the score. So this game could be pretty high scoring. It at least interests me. Arizona, you kind of mentioned it. I'm not going to get all the way up to Caleb Love probably. KJ Lewis, Visar, if he's out there, meant a lot. He's somebody that we've been playing. I'm not sure the industry is caught up with us yet on our love for Visar, but I'd have some interest there as well. Awaka, he could put up a double here. It's a rebounding machine. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in the sub 6K Akron players, actually.
Yeah, I think that this is another one that provides us with value. I think there is some bust potential with them, so you got to be a little bit careful there. And if it does turn out that they become more popular, if we get inkling of that beforehand, I think I'm pretty low, but the total is nearly 170. So clearly, they're going to do some things here, and it's not just going to be Arizona. When you look at the implieds here, there's still 76, 77 points. Arizona over 90. So got to definitely have some consideration on these guys. And Tavari Johnson is the one that certainly stands out to me. KJ Lewis's price has come up to almost 7K, so he's more of a luxury GPP play, but I don't want to fade him if I'm running multiple lineups. I want to keep heat checking him because the way he's playing right now is ridiculously scary. And he's just been like nobody rostering him whatsoever, but he's going to be really good next year, and he's already really good this year. All right, before we move on, T9, my man popping in. Can you feel the madness? Yeah, we had the craziness of the first play-in slate. There was some madness today, but I think we're going to get some buzzer beaters on this slate here, man. These matchups with how close they're going to be, and I think we're going to get even more chaos. Looking forward to that, of course. All right, now we get into Oklahoma versus UConn, the two-time defending national champion UConn Huskies getting in there in the 8-9 game, but don't count them out. It's a total of 148.5. UConn 5.5-point favorites. Why don't you lead us off here and tell me anyone that you're looking at in this matchup?
Yeah, this game, not too crazy about it. I do think Alex Caravan at 7-4. We've kind of seen McNeely and Caravan almost alternate being the alpha, at least at that position. Seems like McNeely's kind of taken a little bit of a backseat recently, whereas Caravan's kind of been surging, putting up some big numbers. I do think Caravan, because of his tournament experience, it might look for him to kind of carry the torch for them. But McNeely's somebody I've been just almost blindly plugging into GPPs lately, just with not much success. But his price has come down to a point where we've seen his 35, 40-point upside at times. Maybe he does seem like a player, even though he's a freshman, that does enjoy the bright lights. So I at least have some interest there in GPPs. Terrace Reed, we've seen have 60-point upside in the past. It just all kind of depends on how much he's out there and if he avoids foul trouble. DR is kind of hovering around a price we're comfortable with the last 3-4 weeks. Solo Ball, same thing. It's just kind of difficult to peg where the production is going to come for UConn, and I'm not too crazy about this game. It has a lower total, so there's nobody who's really jumping off the page. I think you could make a case to play any of the UConn guys pretty much. I'm just really not sure which one I'd go to at this point.
Yeah, I think I like Solo Ball the most there at 6'1". There's some hefty upside, but yeah, Liam McNeely at 6'4", man, and this is such a great buy low spot because people are going to glance through at his logs and see, had the missed time injury there, and then he had a couple of big games against the likes of Villanova, Georgetown, and then he's just kind of like fallen off a cliff and really only hit around 20 fantasy points once over his last 4. I mean, he's been 19, so pretty close, but he hasn't done a whole lot in this Oklahoma matchup, which usually Porter Moser coach teams are not a program that you want to target against, at least for their defense, but they haven't been anywhere near that level. So I think this is actually an interesting spot. And I feel like UConn's going to be looking to prove a point here because people are writing them off and kind of hey, remember us? We're the 2-time defending champions. Yeah, we have a different roster, but don't sleep on us. And I think they could potentially, if they do get out in front on this one, I don't think they slow down. I think it's a foot on the neck situation. So I do like the UConn side here at 5.5. I think they could win by 10 plus points against Oklahoma. I really do. I know Oklahoma's got some dudes that fears Jalen Moore, but I think in this time of year in March and experience that UConn has, Oklahoma doesn't really have those guys. I think this one could become a problem really, really fast. So betting wise, I do like the Huskies, and I would agree with you, Liam McNeely, a classic buy low spot. I've had a ton of success with Terrace Reed and when to jump off, when to jump on. This is a individual matchup that says he could put up a 50 spot, but because I think Liam McNeely and Alex Caravan and those guys do have a good game, it's just going to generally take away from Reed's shot attempts. And they've kind of been managing his minutes a little bit more. He had like 31 against Providence. That was when he put up that 63. Funny enough, I was complaining relentlessly in the game before that against Georgetown when he put up a 40 because I wanted to play him and didn't for some stupid reason. I was like, I don't care what happens. I'm playing him against Providence, got rewarded there, and then jumped off the very next game. Really, it's just been like when his price gets low, we take the shot. When price gets high, we don't. We just kind of leave him alone. Definitely merit to using him in tournaments here, but he's not a survivor play. He's not a single entry play by any means. I think most people know that. All right, we're going to keep it moving here because I am 3 games. We're going to keep rolling. Xavier versus Illinois. This is the one where Scott said Illinois by 50. Xavier escapes a tough Texas team there in the play-in. This one does carry a high total, 160.5. Illinois is a 3.5 point favorite, and yeah, this is another game that is truly stackable. I might play the night slate just for the fact of those earlier games that we like so much being not a factor and just stacking up Illinois and Xavier fully. This is Illinois, when they play teams like this where they can get off offensively, this is really when you want to target them. We saw them against Iowa, and granted it was Iowa. They put up that huge number, 106 points. They gave up 94. And then they played Maryland. They gave up 88 and scored 65, but the defense of Maryland just stifled them entirely. I don't think the defense of Xavier will do the same things, especially with Xavier's defense lately and how Trey Johnson just continued to eat them up repeatedly in that play-in game. Thankfully, they had a really big game from Marcus Forrest, one of the best he's had in like 3 months. So they were able to overcome that. But Trey Johnson was just, especially in the first half, scoring relentlessly and not a lot of defensive resistance. Tremont Mark had a better second half. He scored 16. Trey Johnson scored 23. Both of them just looked really, really good. So I definitely have a lot of interest here on the Illini side. That's usually for me, Will Riley, who is kind of a hybrid wing. He does facilitate, run the point at times, and he also posts up and does a lot of different things. Really big fan of Will Riley. He is a little bit of a luxury price here at 7.5 because we have some really, underpriced guys that we've highlighted. But if of any of the Illini, it's Will Riley for me that I would want, and I am comfortable using him in a main. Might be a little bit too cute for the Survivor, but this matchup against Xavier has overtime written all over it. It has both teams scoring 100+ points written all over it. I just feel like not having any exposure here late is going to be a massive mistake. I would be a little leery of using Kylan Boswell. I know that against Iowa, he put up a monster 42, but 7K for him at any point just makes me feel very uncomfortable, although he has the tournament experience. Trey White at 6'3 is very playable. Tomislav Ivicevic at 7'1 is cheap, and Xavier's front court, I think, definitely will have some problems with Tomislav if he doesn't get into foul trouble. He struggled with Maryland's front court, but Xavier's front court isn't that formidable. And then, of course, you have a depressed price on Kasparas Giacchinos. Like to call him Casper for short there. He had against Maryland the best game of anyone. The Illini's offense got shut down, but he put up 34 fantasy points for whatever reason, but only 13 against Iowa. So he's a frustrating guy, but he's definitely good here too. It could very easily be a Casper versus Conwell game. We'll see. But yeah, Will Riley is the one that I certainly want heavy exposure to. And I think this is a game you want to have in your main lineup somewhere, whether that's Riley or Casper or on the Xavier side. Do not chase Marcus Foster. It was a great game for him. He put up 37, but he's the fourth or fifth option on the team, right? Zach Fremantle was in foul trouble last game. Conwell was in foul trouble. Dallin Swain was in foul trouble. Darius Maddox's shots weren't falling initially, so there was just a need for somebody to step up, and Foster was that guy. So be careful paying 6.2 for him. Swain's always worth a look at 7. Davian McKnight has fallen kind of out of DFS favor, even though he plays a bunch of minutes. So really just a decision of if you want to pay for Conwell or Fremantle. Conwell's a little uncomfortable there at 8.7. He had that monstrous game against Marquette. They ended up losing by 2, but he put up a 50. So his price is still inflated from that. He's normally a guy that we're paying about 7.5 for. So probably not too comfortable for me, even though this matchup against Illinois is plus for him. So that kind of puts us back to Fremantle, who was stuck in foul trouble against Texas for the majority of the game, eked his way to about 22. Do like him against Illinois. I don't see that same level of foul trouble. I think we see him get back to scoring 35+ fantasy points. So that 8.2 price in that regard is definitely cheap. A lot of different ways you can go in this game. After it, there's the kind of ugly Oregon Liberty game and then a fun Bryant Michigan State game. So as you start working our way towards the hammer, this is one that I feel like A, people will be burned out by the time this game kicks off, or B, they'll just be out of PMR because of all the great exposure games in the earlier part of the slate. So where do you find yourself going with your various exposures in a matchup like this that could be a 200 total, honestly?
Yeah, Casper probably for GPP. I'm willing to buy a little bit low. I know he's coming off a decent game, but he kind of cooled off for a while. So I'm willing to buy into that at his price. I agree with Conwell. Like, sure, he could put up a 50 when he gets hot from behind the arc. I mean, he's one of the hottest shooters in the country at times, but I'm not going to go up there, especially coming off some big games. I'd much rather go and play Fremantle at a price we're somewhat comfortable with. Maybe pair him with Swain at 7K. I think Swain and Fremantle are my favorite two on the Xavier side, and then Casper to buy low on Illinois. I know you like Will Riley. I don't think I've played him once this year. I just don't have a good feel for him. I don't have a good feel for any of the Illinois guys. I haven't really played them this year as much as I should, and I probably missed out on some opportunities because of that. But I'd be willing to buy low on Casper and hope that it's maybe another shootout on this slate. Definitely not playing Boswell. Too expensive. Boswell's almost the Illinois version of Conwell, where the price has just got no point. I'm just not comfortable paying. Yeah, I think those are the three guys probably. Fremantle feels fine. Giacchinos if you want to buy low, and then I like pairing Fremantle with Swain if you want two pieces on Xavier.
Yeah, and Scott's still milling about here. Says Morris Johnson smash, and he may be right. I didn't think with Morez coming back, that they would jump him into a huge amount of minutes there right away. Against Iowa, they eased him in and he had 12, but he also put up 16 in that 12 minutes. And then they did turn him loose against Maryland, and he played 28 minutes and put up a 30. So his fantasy point per minute number has been absolutely insane all year round along. We were playing him a lot, with some of the other injuries to Illinois, sicknesses they had before he got hurt. We were just playing him, nonstop. Now he's priced at only 4.8, and right around the 27, 28 minutes he just got against Maryland. If he sees that against Xavier, we're talking about a guy putting up a near 6x number. And you can confidently say that would happen if he gets those minutes. He's just one of those dudes that you can peg like, hey, if he's going to not foul and he's going to actually be on the floor, he's going to be putting those up. If he gets into foul trouble and plays only 12 minutes, he still might have 20 fantasy points in this spot. So really good call out there by Scott, because they're already ramping him up after 2 games, and could very well see him eke his way back into the starting lineup, which maybe hurt Will Riley a bit because it did before. But either way, at 4.8, I'm willing to take the shot there with him, depending on the rest of my build, which I haven't even attempted to build a lineup yet for this slate. All right, Bryant versus Michigan State. Spartans are 17.5 point favorites. That opened at 19.5, 20, so that's come down a little bit. Did get it at 19.5 for myself. Total of 152.5. I'd mentioned several times, I wish Bryant would have gotten Alabama, because that would have been like a 250 total. But this is going to be a big opportunity for Bryant. I think Spartans win, but I think they'll be able to kind of push their pace a little bit and make Spartans uncomfortable. And it could be a Jace Richardson game because of that, because I think the Spartans, they're not going to want to necessarily get into that kind of frenetic pace. And Trey Holloman's going to have to hit some shots, but this just feels like give the ball to Jace and let him answer when Earl Timberlake and company, drive down our throats, hit threes with a hand in their face, and generally make us, pre-panic situation. So I know you're not a real big fan on the Spartans here, but Bryant's another team that, being out in that area, you have some familiarity with. They have a ton of P5 cast-offs. They've done a great job of working the portal to their advantage. I think there's some spots here we can definitely target. Who are you on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to be honest. I haven't seen Bryant much since they left the NEC. Okay. I know in terms of just looking at some of the numbers, you'd think, man, these guys are probably going to project fairly well. I just don't know which one necessarily to go to. I figured maybe that would be more your expertise. Whereas Michigan State, it's a team I don't like. They all seem to have the same prices that we're used to, but you'd expect them to put up a pretty big number. At least we know Jace Richardson's kind of going to be the alpha. He's going to have the ball in his hands more often. At 7.6, I don't know. I haven't played many Michigan State guys this year. My first instinct was to look at the values for Michigan State, but that's tough too, because he plays such a deep rotation that the cheap guys are just in the normal rotation. So we can't really predict who would sit if the game blows out and who would still be on the court. So it's kind of a difficult situation with Michigan State. You just have to land on the right spot. And then with Bryant, I'm sure they really have 3 guys. Timberlake, I'm sure, is playable. Pinzone, I'm sure, is playable. Barry Evans stood out to me. I mean, I just don't know these guys as well as you probably do, but I assumed that they would be certainly playable in the spot. This is a death matchup against Michigan State. And like we've said many times, even if this game blows out, those guys will be on the floor.
Yeah, and I think we might actually see some elevated ownership on a guy like Carson Cooper. I've been pretty fortunate with the Michigan State Spartans forward value. Like early in the season, we got some good games from Xavier Booker before he just ended up like completely out of the rotation. Had some nice games on Jackson Keeler and then Cohen Carr. Like we've hit on them. And then last slate, I actually had more ownership on Carson Cooper than I planned, simply because that's all I had left was like 3.9, 3.8. So I was like, I guess I can play Carson Cooper. And I was pretty happy that I did. He's priced at 4.6 now. I'm uncomfortable with him at that price just because there's no guarantee. He played the 28 minutes against Wisconsin, but that could very easily be 14 to 15. But I do think because this is such a appealing matchup from a DFS standpoint, that people will see what he did last game and end up wanting to get some exposure here. Probably can't afford guys like Jace Richardson and Jackson Keeler with the rest of the slate. So Carson Cooper will give them that exposure, and I think that could be a little bit of a mistake. just because he is almost 5K now. And if he's going to be like 20% owned, that just kind of puts me off of him a great deal. Would like to just play Jace Richardson in this spot because he's gonna actually be able to probably shoot 20 plus times, but he's almost 8K, so definitely have to pause playing an 8K Michigan State player, although he does appear to be relatively safe from the craziness of that Tom Izzo rotation. Bryant guys, they're not cheap, and I'm glad because they shouldn't be. Earl Timberlake, had some time in Miami. Raphael Pinson spent some time at St. John's. Barry Evans was with St. Bonaventures, I believe. So, all these guys are fairly solid. They won't be intimidated whatsoever. Pinson has fantastic rates, 29.1% shot rate, 24.6% usage rate, shoots just under 40% from long range, excellent free throw shooter, plays a ton of minutes. Earl Timberlake, 16.8% defensive rebounding rate, 23% assist rate, 23% usage rate, and he plays 87.1% of the available minutes, top 60 in the country. So, yeah, he won't be leaving the floor anytime soon. And then Barry Evans, been a solid rebounder, solid overall three-point shooter, right around 39% himself. All these guys are definitely worth looks. Night slate, GBPs. Had someone, I got to get in the Discord when we get done here because I know a lot of people are reaching out to me, and I was basically, like I said, just turned everything off and paced the floor while watching the game. But I saw somebody ask me about Earl Timberlake maybe being the posh play of the day. He's certainly in that range at 7-8, and that'll be a price that I think people have a hard time getting to. I don't think I'll get there myself, but he definitely has some posh play vibes. I would rather take the discount on Pinson, solid rates, maybe not quite the upside of Earl Timberlake, but the floor is certainly there. But I would be a little bit worried about Michigan State keying it on Pinson and forcing him into a bunch of turnovers. So again, these Bryant guys are more luxury plays than anything. If they were cheaper, we could definitely look there, but then everyone else would too. Ja'Kai Robinson at 3.6 is worth a dart throw GP look. Did play 30 minutes 2 games ago, had some spot starts earlier in the season, has solid enough rates to when he does play over 20 minutes, he pays off that 3.6 tag. So somebody to kind of look at there as well. And he was also a P5 transfer cast off. So, all right, last game on the slate, Liberty versus Oregon. I've already said my spiel several times about how this is a terrible matchup for Liberty. It is. Looking at it when the slate first dropped earlier today, and I had every intention of editing it and have everything ready before the show, but then the games happened. Nate Biddle was one I was like, man, he is going to put up a huge number. He is priced at 9.3, which is kind of high, but he's been over 9K for about 2 weeks now. So we've had an opportunity to kind of just get adjusted to how life is now with Nate Biddle. Regardless of the game blowing out or not, he will be a primary reason for it. And he may have 40 by halftime. This Liberty team is going to shoot a ton. They're going to have a really rough time trying to get rebounds off of missed shots. Biddle might have a 20 rebound game. That is a very real possibility here. Also really like Kwame Evans. I've been using him a lot. He is priced cheaper than he has been lately at 5K, so he's back into that range where we can use him. He's been playing elevated minutes. They rely on him more, and he's been, a big factor down the stretch for why Oregon's been able to kind of turn things around and become a pretty formidable squad at this point. So I do like Evans if you can't get to Biddle. Evans is a little bit more versatile, does block shots, does rebound, but he's also a pretty solid three-point shooter when he gets those looks, and definitely more affordable than obviously 9.3. So those are the two main ones that I look at. I know people are going to be asking about Jackson Shellstad, TJ Bamba, who are under 7K, but the guards on Oregon just don't really do it for me very often. And Brandon Angel will have those random one-offs where he puts up a 30, but his minutes are pretty sporadic at this moment. So I keep all my Ducks exposure to either Evans if you're looking for that discount, or if you want to prioritize a spend up, Nate Biddle, who is just going to be a real problem for Liberty to deal with. As far as the Liberty guys go, the Caden Matheny, he's going to chuck a ton of threes. That is his game. He has just single-handedly carried this Liberty team at times, especially in that Jacksonville State game. Early on, it looked like Jacksonville State had a real legitimate chance of beating them, but then Matheny just went unconscious and ended up burying them. And that Jacksonville State team is pretty good. They just beat Georgia Tech in the NIT a couple of days ago. So I do like Matheny, but again, he's going to have a rough go of it getting open looks, but he will chuck. My man John Poulakaitis today for Yale, he had a pretty rough go early because they were defending him so well. And then you saw in the second half, once he decided, no, I'm going to be shooting, that's what Caden Matheny can do. Start hitting those shots regardless, give him a half inch of room, and he's going to fire it up. So he's the most playable Liberty guy for sure, but nobody on this Liberty team is going to be a priority for me against this Oregon team. I honestly think that they're just going to get their doors blown off. I don't see this one being competitive whatsoever. Initially, it sounded like people were going to be leaning towards Liberty, but I think now that everyone's had a chance to kind of sink their teeth into the matchup, look at metrics, look at all that stuff, it just seems like a really bad spot for Liberty. So I'm going to pass on them and really kind of make the determination, am I going to go to Nate Biddle or not? And when I look at the pay-ups on this slate, there are some pretty good ones, sure, but Nelly Jr. Joseph we're uncomfortable with. Norchad O'Meara, he's been good, but I rarely feel like I play him, and I don't know that he ends up on the optimal all that much these days. Cooper Flagg, we know, is probably not playing full minutes. Derek Queen is solid, but that price when compared to Julian Reese, how do we justify that? Cam Jones, probably a very playable pay up. And then you get into PJ Haggerty, Dane Danger, who we really like. So when you get up over 9K, Nate Biddle to me looks like the top pay up overall on the slate. And I feel pretty comfortable with him if I get there. The Memphis guys are still more of a priority, but I do like Biddle. So will you have any exposure there and anything else you want to add to this game before we finish up here?
It's possible I will. I kind of view Biddle the same way that we viewed Toppin on this slate, where he was kind of the hammer game. He was a pay up, and he wasn't that popular. Didn't really hit value, didn't really play the way we wanted to because he just wasn't on the court as much as we expected. But Biddle certainly could be that player that you have kind of hanging there at the end as a hammer. And like you said, he should be able to pull in a lot of rebounds. When they get the ball to Biddle, good things happen. We've seen him have big games before, double upside. So I'm certainly considering that. I always like playing hammers, even though I know technically it doesn't matter when you play a guy. Certainly worth a look. You mentioned Matheny. I like shot chuckers, so I'd at least have some interest there, especially on a night slate. And Talon Peter kind of caught my eye, actually just in that game against Jacksonville State. And he's an incredible athlete. He's been really efficient from the floor lately. He's cheap at 5'2". Probably won't be putting him on the main slate necessarily, but would at least be interested in him on a night slate as well on the Liberty side.
Yeah, definitely. And Toppin, the first half was terrible. He ended up getting a nut like 35. Thankfully for the decision of the day today, right, was Braden Smith in that great matchup or JD Toppin. Braden Smith shot terribly, or that could have gone. Obviously he was the right call there, but thankfully Toppin's just so good in that second half, especially that last 10 minutes. He really kind of put his foot on the neck of UNCW. So yeah, I could see something like that here similarly, where people are using the earlier pay-ups, because I do think we'll see a bit of ownership there on a guy like Cam Jones, especially. We've seen him be pretty chalky throughout. Obviously the Memphis guys, I think Nick Clifford will get some. So by the time we get there to the Oregon game, I think that PMR just won't be there for people to roster Biddle. They're going to have to decide early on in the slate, I'm playing Nate Biddle. It's not one that you're just going to fall into. You have to kind of build around him if you're going to go there. And I don't think he's a priority necessarily in your main lineup, but I do think he has a chance to be the highest scorer on the slate. But if it gets out of hand to the point where they do, use Supreme Cook and some of those secondary big men that they don't use as much, but have some pretty high pedigree from their previous programs, it could kind of fizzle out there for Biddle, and maybe he doesn't need to do as much, or he plays less in the second half. We have seen some blowouts for Oregon before where Biddle, got pulled early and ended up scoring like 25, which would be a disaster on this slate. Mistakes are going to be punished way harder on this slate than they were today. I want to continue to drive that in your guys' heads. So I do like Biddle a lot, but probably will end up being more of a GBP look. And I may be a little bit light on PMR for these last 3 games, even though I like them, but I think everybody will be light on PMR here. But the more I look at it with Morez Johnson in Illinois, like that's probably going to be a main team play. And then we'll find a way to maybe sprinkle in some Kwame Evans. Unfortunately, I don't have a Trevelyan Queen super special Nolan Hodge play for this slate. I get one of those every couple of years, so no real fun ones there, but definitely an interesting one. What is like, and you probably haven't a ton of time to look at it and build out a core, but what is like 2 or 3 players that you feel like you're probably going to be gravitating towards for your main lineup, survivor, that kind of thing?
Yeah, Morris Johnson, I admit, I just kind of overlooked him. And then once I kind of pulled him up, I said, oh, yeah, wait, he's back. He played 28 minutes last game. So it's certainly, he's somebody on the list. I think we talked about Maraskis on St. Mary's. Very interested in him. I don't know about the Baylor guards yet. I haven't really made a decision there. I mean, they help you a lot with the salary, and they're decent value plays. I think Alabama – Diabate is somebody, especially if we get word that Nelson's really not going to be out there. I think he was a pretty cheap price. And then probably just PJ Haggerty. I just know we're going to have the money to pay up for him. So if we can marry some of that value that we talked about with a PJ Haggerty, maybe throw in a Morris Johnson or a Maraskis, that's kind of where I'm at, just as a really rough core, because I know we kind of just put this together now. I'm sure we'll refine it by the morning, but those are some guys I think we can, value, mid-range, pay up.
Absolutely. Yeah. I 100%. And, we didn't really talk as much. We went really deep into it last night, but didn't have a core necessarily. And I wanted to kind of give one there for people that were watching in the morning or now to kind of build around. But yeah, for me, it's looking like Haggerty as the top, starting point for my lineup. Morris Johnson is that value is probably going to be popular. And then, Paulius, who's right in that lower mid-range area of spots that I really like. So I think starting with those 3 is definitely 100% where I want to go. And then go back into the Baylor, Mississippi State, Bama, Robert Morris, Iowa State, Lipscomb game and start plucking out plays from there and building, seeing what I have left, and then making some determinations there for the later games. So I think that will wrap up the slate. So we did that very quickly. I do appreciate that. Before we go, do you have any, things to add, best bets, props, or anything else that you want to kind of, chew on, digest here before we head out, or what do you think?
I think I'll add some to the Discord tomorrow. I know I don't do that as often. I know I mentioned the Mississippi State UNC. I like those money lines and spreads if you want to just buy a couple points. And we've talked about it a million times. Memphis, they're still underdogs. I think they're plus 110 on DraftKings still. Those are the 3 sides that stood out that I'm probably going to be betting. You could even mix and match and parlay them. In terms of player props and maybe any other sides, I'm sure a couple will stand out to me or pop up in the morning, and I'll certainly make that known.
Definitely agree. For me, I like the UConn minus 5.5. That one I've grown warmer to as we've gone. Oregon minus 6.5. To me, that just feels like the slam dunk of the day. I do not see that game being under double digits. So that's a big one. Probably my favorite bet, Oregon minus 6.5, UConn minus 5.5. And then I do like Marquette minus 3.5. That was one I didn't want to bet originally, but geez, the Mountain West team's just getting shellacked once again. Makes me feel pretty good about betting Marquette. And then St. Mary's minus 4.5 against Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt will be in it for a while, but then they'll just get worn down by St. Mary's. And I think once Jalen Carey gets into foul trouble, Devin McLaughlin, it's just going to be a rebounding party for St. Mary's, and a lot of second and third opportunities there are just going to bury Vanderbilt by 10 plus. So those are the ones that I am on as well. I will have a ton of player prop stuff. Had a ton today in the Discord. It's some pretty solid results there. Best being the over 6.5 rebounds for Vic Locken, even though they had a rough game. He had his rebounding prop, and then under 6.5 rebounds for Nick Townsend of Yale. So we'll find the best ones there and load you up. Bright and early in the morning, there will be the article breakdown, which rehashes all the starting lineup stuff, injury designations, player pools. And then there will be a fully refined DVP filter projections on there, but do expect this to be a very high scoring slate, very different from the one that we just had. But I think that will wrap it up. I appreciate you guys tuning in live. I know it's a little bit late here. Probably the same situation tomorrow for me. We'll be watching the games in late, and if I have any kind of sweats, we'll be going live later on. But we'll have the 8-game slate breakdown for Saturday happening later on Friday night. So make sure you guys have the notifications turned on for the FTN network and at Deuce85 on Twitter, so you do not miss any of those updates, not only on the show when it's going to happen, but obviously injury news, player stuff, content. You don't want to miss any of that. So thanks for you guys' continued support. And on the way out the door, please make sure, if you haven't done so already, you hit that like button. All of that stuff that you do for us has been a tremendous help, and we are doing very, very well on the old algorithm of YouTube. Adam, thank you very much for joining me. I know I was getting late there and you didn't hear from me, but you're a trooper, so I do appreciate that very much. Glad to hear you had a good betting day, and look forward to another all-day session in the Discord grinding games with you and the community as a whole.
Absolutely. Let's run it back. Today was great, and the best part about the Friday slate is that you essentially just do it all over again. So looking forward to it. It's only in like eight or 9 hours. So
get some rest, everybody, and we'll get back to the green screens and window trips